all the in-office promotions have the same core components. It is tweaking and targeting some of those components. But you never, in marketing, you never, ever get away from what is called a target market. You never, ever get away from what is called establishing need. And you never, ever get away from covering obstacles and trust. Those are things you never get away from. Now, they will certainly be tweaked depending on who your target market is and what you're promoting, but those categories will always remain. And so the good news about marketing, when you really understand it, it's the skeleton stays the same, whether it's demographics, psychographics, geographics, psychographic barriers, vehicles, delivering gateways. That's the target market. Now, those will be tweaked depending on what your product or service is and what you're trying to do. And then the core of the purchase, whether it's need, obstacles relative to trust, those will be tweaked depending on your target market and what those are. But those will always be the same. So having said that, let's go ahead and cover the St. Patrick's in-office monthly promotion. And let me just cover the basics here, and then I'm going to go into the psychology of some of these major components. So basically what it is, it's a free St. Patrick's Day gift and a chance to win the Leprechaun Pot of Gold. And we'll go into the psychology of all this, but it's basically a free gift and a chance to win the Leprechaun Pot of Gold and it's a drawing. And it's a drawing to refer friends, family members, or coworkers and win the pot of gold. And so we're tying it right into what consumers already know, which is St. Pat's Day and the pot of gold. And so right up here is the benefits. So the top prize winners, and by the way, this is very much what your flyer would look like right here. This is the order and the content of what your flyer would look like. So the very first headline is what the promotion is. The second one is the big benefit. So real quickly, we're telling them the big benefit, so they get a free gift. That's the big benefit we're telling them right away, and then they can win the pot of gold. That's the benefit. That's to grab their attention. And then the short is what's the program about? It's about referring friends, family, and coworkers to win the pot of gold. So the next goes into the benefit, the top prize. The winner's choice is one of the following. And after I cover this, I'm going to go into this a little greater detail, but I just wanted to do a quick overview on what the actual promotion is and then go into the psychology of it. So you can see here the top prize is 1 month's paid gas. It is a limited. Anytime we offer a month's utility or anything, we always put a dollar figure on it and we limit it. So anyway, and then you see here it says, so we have 1 month's paid gas card, 1 month's paid utility bill, and a grocery card. And then it says $50 credit for chiropractic services for all patients who refer. So anybody that refers automatically will win. They don't even have to win the drawing and they'll get something. And all patients, whether they participate or not, will receive a free St. Patty's Day gift. And so the free offer for those that referred. So who they refer, and again, this is the offer for who they refer, is the consultation, 4-part examination, and 1 treatment. And we're going to talk about each of these in just a minute. We have the bonus, the total value, and the cost. It's free St. Patty's Day drawing. There's only 2 criteria. The referred patient must come into the office on or before March 17th, and they must come in with referring patient. And then this last one says double the referrals, double your drawing chances. So we're going to give them twice as many chances in the drawing, depending on the number of the referrals they have. So if they have 1 drawing, if there's 1 referral, they get 1 drawing. If they have 2 referrals, we're going to double that. We're going to multiply it times 2, so that they're going to chance for 4 drawings. And if it's 3 referrals, it's 6. So they exponentially increase their likelihood of winning a higher prize for the more referrals that they have. And then the drawing is to take place at the end of March 17th, the business day. And if March 17th is on a weekend, Saturday or Sunday, then just do it the previous day. That's all. So that's the St. Pat's Day promotion. Now let's go into the psychology and the specifics of it. So first of all, we always talk about the importance to tie. Number one is to have a monthly in-office promotion. So you must have that because we're targeting the circle of influence, the introductions, and those are the highest quality of patients, and it's the highest trust and the highest potential need. That's where the greatest business occurs. And remember, it's totally okay every month because your new patients are cycling through. Every month you're getting 10, 20, 30, whatever new patients coming through, number one. And number two, life changes. So even if you didn't get any new patients and they were the same 30 people the next month, they and their families had accidents and injuries in the last 30 days. So we want to tie it. That's why you want it to be monthly, and then we always want to tie it into a national brand. So we'll always tie it into the national federal holidays and the highest awareness holidays in the United States. And so in March, it is St. Patrick's Day. That's the highest awareness day in March. Now, you always want to dress your office in the theme. And, these things are real important. And that's why it's so important to turn your in-office promotions over to preferably your marketing assistant who is either a primary or secondary sanguine. So the person in your office, and this is typically who you typically would turn this over to, is your marketing assistant. But obviously you'd prefer to have hired them because they had some choleric, sanguine, or melancholy sanguine personality characteristics. It is a sanguine you want to turn this over to. Do not try to turn this over to a passive phlegmatic or an introvert. An introvert or a passive phlegmatic, this thing will drop like a lead balloon. You want a life of the party type of person to be handling this. And then remember, all your promotions, you should have just a little box for all your monthly promotions. And you get all that material from any of these dollar stores. These dollar stores always have the latest themes where you can get your cardboard cutouts, your materials, very inexpensive. And as a matter of fact, that's where we get the free gifts too, very inexpensive. And then all of your in-office promotions for that theme go into that box. And that's the box that goes in the storage, and then it comes out next March. So you should have like 12 different little boxes of material, and they should all be separated out. Like in my office, we had it in our storage area. I'm not talking about big boxes because we're talking about cardboard cutouts, things that are relatively flat. So we had really flat, small boxes, but each of these boxes had the cardboard cutouts and the themes and the promotions for every in-office promotion we did. So whatever month it was, we just pulled that box off the shelf, opened it up, and there was all the theme for that year, and then we boxed it all up for next year. And we just rotated it. And every month, that's exactly what we did. So that's how easy it is to get this material. And remember, the more the better. This is the kind of thing that most doctors don't like to do unless they're a high sanguine doctor. But this is all about emotion. This is all about emotion and stirring emotion. This is not a cognitive exercise. This is an emotional exercise. And so you definitely want a high extrovert or sanguine in your office to be in charge of these promotions. And that's what I did. So who is the target? So let's run through the psychology of the marketing now. So who is the target for the St. Pat's Day promotion? Well, it's your women patients. Your women patients are the ones who get involved not only with themes, they're more emotional, and they like, when things are dressed up relative to themes, but also games. Women are really way more, and I'm obviously being a generalist, but it's generally true. Emotional marketing, and it's a game. And those are the people. So don't expect a cognitive high choleric to be really participating with this event. They're not. This is going to be like amusing, and they're just want to get in and out of your office. So be highly aware of what's called segmentation. And also, this is always, again, we're talking about the circle of influence. And remember, when we talk about a circle of influence, that's where there's higher trust and need. But remember, there's what's called the inner circle of influence, and then there's the outer circle of influence. But in the inner circle of influence, you have an inner and outer circle of influence. And so this is really targeted to the mother, sister, or best girlfriend. That's really where this is targeted. That is where you're going to have high probability, not only of emotional content, but people who are more sensitive to their health and have a problem and more willing to do something to help somebody. Let's face it, a woman will pay a lot more attention to another woman's problem versus a guy and another guy's problem, generally speaking. So this is how it is targeted. It is not up for everybody, because remember, you always have to have a target. You have to know what. And we're going to go after the primary need. So we want to go into the primary need. The other major factor in this is you definitely want to know who your 20%ers are. Remember, you should have a list of who your 3%ers are and who your 17%ers are. And those cumulatively make up your 20%ers. And remember, it's your 20% that are responsible for over 80% of your referrals and your money. So make sure you know who those, make sure you have those two lists. And the definition of a 3%er is somebody who has stayed and paid for care and referred two or more people. That's the definition. The definition of somebody who is a 17%er is somebody who stayed and paid for care and has referred at least one person. Those are the definitions of a 3%er or a 17%er. And it is those people that you definitely want to pay a lot of attention to focus your energies and your energy and time. Remember, you always have limited time and energy, so you always want to leverage it into the best possible return. So how is it promoted? It's promoted just like all the in-office promotions. Number one, you're going to get over 80% of your participants from your active patients. That's where it's going to come from. It will not come from an advertisement in the local paper. That is not where it will come from. It's from being proactive with your patients. That's where the vast majority of this business will come from. Number two is a phone call to your 3%ers or your 20%ers. So the very least that should happen is there should be a phone call placed to your 3%ers, letting them know of the promotion. And basically you just read off the flyer. All the flyer is the benefits and what the offer is. That's what it is. So the very minimum that should happen is your 3%ers. Now, whether it's your 3%ers or your 20%ers, or whether you promote this to your call all your past patients, depends on the size of your past patients. If you got a really small list, I'm calling everybody on that list. If it's relatively new in practice and I got a small list, I'm calling everybody, not just 3%ers. Obviously, if I have a huge practice and have been in business for 20 years, my 3% list should be pretty big. So that depends on the size of your practice. And then the video newsletter. These are the three ways that every in-office promotion, these are the standard vehicle of deliveries. Now, the only other two considerations that you may want to consider is placing a local ad in your local paper, and that is totally cost dependent. If it's relatively inexpensive, we'll do that. And it has to be a very, very small local paper. So if we have that combination, we'll consider putting an ad in. And then the other one that we always want to consider is contacting the local newspaper, the person who's responsible for the news of health articles, of health news. You should, by the way, you should know these people and have met them and invited them to your office and explained what chiropractic does and all that. you should know them almost on a first name basis, your local advertising person who takes care of the health section of your local newspaper. And then call them. They should always get a phone call and let them know what they're doing. Remember, everybody is always news hungry. So, and remember, that's not just for potential new business, but when they publish anything like that, you always want to keep it. Those are great. Anytime you're promoted in a local newspaper, you want to keep that stuff, and we always turn it back out in our marketing. So those are some of the two ancillary factors we'll consider, but these are the top three. And the number one is proactive with your patients. That's where you're going to get 80% of your business. Now, the subject, remember the target, is say who you are targeting. And you want to say family, friends, and coworkers. You always want to say who you are targeting because it goes right to the top of consciousness. If you don't, and you ask an open-ended question and you don't say who they're targeting, they have to think, and you have a higher probability of getting a no. So say specifically who you're targeting in the message. So who we're targeting is the family, friends, and coworkers. That's who we're targeting. And specifically of the family, friends, and coworkers, we're looking at the mother, sister, and best friends or best girlfriend, coworker. That's who we're targeting. So I want to say, especially when I'm saying the ad, I'm going to say, any of your family, friends, coworkers, how about your mother, sister, or your best girlfriend? That is exactly what I'm going to say, because once I say that, if any of those people complained about a problem, immediately it registers. They don't even have to think about it. So you also always want to use a gateway. Now, this is just basic marketing 101. You have to be specific with things. You just cannot be a generalist. So again, what's the gateway? And the gateway we like to use here is arthritis and muscle pain. It's a very good gateway. It fits the target market, and it works real well. So specifically say arthritis and muscle pain. It's a very highly specific, and specifically say family members and friends, and specifically say mother, sister, best friend, girlfriend. That's specifically what you definitely want to be saying. Now, we give three categories of gifts. There's always a top prize, second prizes, and prize for everybody who participates. So this is just a generic statement that, anytime we do the monthly in-office promotions, there's a top prize. We like to give what are called secondary prizes, and then a prize for everybody involved. We just want to give and that's these trinkets we keep talking about. And remember, the prize that everybody should get is already been reverse engineering. You shouldn't even have to make anything up with this. Everybody should, and these are the three promotional items that you should have. You should have a box of these promotional items just in your closet waiting to be distributed. Because these are the highest promotional items that stay in a home the longest. Number one is a potato chip clip bag holder with your name and phone number on them. That's called a publicity item. These are the things that stay around the house the longest. So number one is a potato chip clip bag holder. So you should just order a box of those. Pizza cutters. You should do those plastic pizza cutters. You just should order a box of those. And all you have to do is Google promotional items. That's all you have to do to order them. They're very simple and easy and inexpensive. And then measuring cups. So it's the items that are in the kitchen are the ones that stay around the longest. So every month when we do a promotional item, an in-office promotion, we like to give all of our active patients a free gift. And in this case, it should just be one of these items. So it's nice if you just rotated those out. If you had a box of each one of those and each promotional item, just rotate them out. And remember, that has to do with the law of reciprocity. When you give something to somebody, there's a higher their defenses and resistance go down, and there's a higher willingness for them to do something back in return. That's the purpose of the gift, the law of reciprocity. So there is a deadline. It's March 17th. Remember, you always have deadlines. And again, if the 17th is on a Saturday or Sunday, then just move it forward to that Friday, whatever the last business day is for you. And remember, if any patient cannot come in prior to that for real reasons, yes, we will accept them after that. But those are the hard deadlines to get everybody to act now. Remember, deadlines are very important to get people to act. So the gifts, top prize, secondary prize, prize for everybody. Now, if you notice when we went to the prizes, I'm going to come back up here to the prizes for a second. You notice these prizes are very important. It says 1 month's paid gas card. It says 1 month's paid utility bill. It says grocery card. So you could also include it in here 1 month's car payment. Now the reason that those are those are so important is those are called primary needs. Primary needs. Those gifts, those are very valuable. Now remember, we are talking about basically a middle class, middle lower class target market with chiropractic. They typically don't have disposable incomes, middle upper class disposable incomes. So these are way more valuable to a middle class, middle lower class target market. And so that's why we said gas. When I say gas, I'm talking about gas to a car, utility bill, or a grocery card. And all we do is we just put a number to this. So you could very easily make this like a 1 month's gas card. You can make this. You can make it $250 or $100. Again, one of the factors that I'm going to look at is what is my dollar per visit, or my case average. If one patient is $1,000, am I going to be okay with spending under $250 in this promotion? Certainly. I mean, easily. That's how this is looked at. So, and remember what you do is you never just give them money. Never give money. It's the worst gift you can give unless the person is in survival. Then that's the gift you definitely want to give. But never give somebody money because there's no emotional connection to money. So here, that's why we said here, grocery card. Now we're going to give them a card with $50 or $25, whatever, $20, whatever. We're going to give them a card for the grocery store, but we want to say grocery card. Now it's even better if instead of saying grocery card, if it said something that was real relevant to your target market, like meat or meat. Grocery card for meat products or something like that. That would even have more value. Or vegetable products, say, that would have more value than just giving somebody $20. So same with utility bill. See, that creates value. Even though I'm not going to pay their utility bill, we're just going to give them a gift card for them to use their own self-discretion to pay their utility bill. So could they take that gift card of $50 or $100 and go buy liquor or beer with it? Sure they can. But we're wanting to create the emotional connection here. That's what we're doing. That's the importance of this. That's why you never want to give away just money. Never. So having said that, let's kind of move through here. So these would be some classic gifts. If I were to do money, and you can see here, these are the gifts that are in the drawings. So the more people they refer, the more drawings they have. And remember, the drawings are double. So if they refer 2 people, they get 4 drawings, not 2. If they refer 3, they get 6 drawings, not 3. So the more referrals they get, the more drawings they get, the higher likelihood they have of winning one of these. Now, you could put only one of these in there. Don't put all 3. You're totally okay with putting only one of these in there. So it might be $100, card for one of these things, or $150 or $200, whatever you feel is okay for you. So only use one of these, and then everybody that does refer, remember, anybody that does refer will get credit. I'm going to talk about that here in just a second. So we talked about how it's promoted, proactive with your patients, number one. We talked about the phone calls that are made the offers, and then the video newsletter. And all the video newsletter, it's just a webcam, and all you're doing is making an announcement. You're just making an announcement, and just all you need to do is read from your flyer. Either look at it and read it like this, or just put it on your screen and read it from your screen as you're recording it. That's how simple that is. And that gets emailed out to your patient base. And of course, we talked about what goes in the headline. What always goes in the headline is the benefit. So obviously, what would say in this would be the free gift and the drawing to a pot of gold, to the leprechaun's pot of gold. And remember, so that the first thing that we always want in the subject headline is the benefit. What are they going to benefit from? And the reason we want that is to stir their interest so they actually open the email. And then the only thing that should really be in the email is a copy and paste of your flyer. It's just literally says what you're doing. We're having a St. Patty's Day, and this is, what we just covered is literally what is on there. It's just copied and paste right into the email what is on the flyer. That's how simple this is. This is not complicated at all. Okay, so that's the video newsletter. Just a couple things. Remember, you always want to, a couple things there. With the phone call, remember it's okay to call more than once. Just when you call once, and if you don't get an answer, leave the message, who you are, and leave the promotion on the recorded device, and then move on. Don't even worry about, checking back necessarily with those people. If anything, you could call back once or twice to see if they received the message and if they were interested in the promotion. Now, same with the video newsletter. Remember, you never do something once. Never. If you're going to do something only once, you shouldn't even do it at all. Because remember, the statistics go up significantly if somebody receives that message 3 times. So you should always, every time you do a campaign, you should always think about reaching out to that target market a minimum of 3 times, a minimum. So same with the video newsletter. All you have to do is after you cut the video, just send it the first time. Remember, anytime you send something consecutive, always put on there second notice. And then the last one you put on there, always put on final notice. And that goes in the headline. So the first one is just a big benefit. Then you'd send it out again. And remember, this is over a 2-week period. This promotion's over a 2-week period. So the first video would go out, and then about 4 days later, you'd resend the video again. And the only thing that I'm doing, nothing changes except in the headline, I'm putting second notice, and then it's the big benefit again. Copy, paste in the body of what the flyer is, and the link to the video of you explaining what's involved. That's how simple this is. The third time, just send it out the Wednesday before, like if that 2 days before, like 2 days before, whatever that deadline is, then put on there final notice. And then the big benefit, because that registers, that makes people feel like they're missing. It makes them pay more attention when you say second notice or third notice or final notice. That makes people pay more attention, and that this was consecutive and you missed it already. Okay, so subject, we talked about who the target is. We talked about the gateway, it's arthritis and pain. So let me come back into a little bit more of the psychology here. There is a $50 credit of chiropractic services for all patients who refer. Now, I need to explain how that's legal, because you cannot buy patients. In other words, that's why it's a drawing. In other words, you can't just give 50 people $50 for everybody they refer. That's in healthcare. You cannot buy business in healthcare. That's illegal. But you can do a drawing. That's not illegal. And then we just give a higher preference. So if somebody's referring to, we want to give them the more probability of winning. So not just would they get to, that's why I say we'll give them 4 chances instead of 2. I want that person to have a higher chance. Now, you'll see why here in a minute. So how can we give a $50 credit for chiropractic services for all patients who refer if it's illegal? Well, it's not illegal when we do it this way. It's for administrative help. In other words, can we pay patients for their administrative help? Yeah. You have employees that you pay. So anybody that helps you, you can pay. There's a couple criteria. And we'll go over that here in just a second. Let me cover that in just a second. Well, let me cover it now since we're on it. Number one is well, actually, there's a lot more to it. So let me cover that here because this is a major concept you have to be aware of when you're doing promotions. So let me cover that here in just a second. So remember the flyers are at every station. So you have a green. Remember, you always make the theme, the color of your flyer, the theme. So buy the color of paper of whatever theme you have. Well, St. Patrick's is obviously green, so buy green copy paper, and then have it printed off with black ink. So so make it a theme. So remember, these are always at every station. Each team member promotes. Each team member is bonused, and green flyer, black print. So remember some of the basics, that there's engagement at every interactive station, whether it's the front desk, the doctor, or the therapist, and that's in the office. Why? Is because their awareness goes up from the time they first come into the office and the person says something to them. Well, that's coming into their awareness. Well, now they come back to the doctor. Now he says something. There's a much higher awareness. Then they go to the therapist. Now it's much, much, much more aware, as opposed to if nobody said anything to that patient and everybody was waiting for the therapist. You see, now she's starting from much, much lower awareness. And that's why you want everybody to start breaking down the barriers all the way through the office. That's why. And introducing the promotion. Now, this says, refer friends or family coworkers and win the pot of gold. Now, it says on a whiteboard. Remember, you should have a whiteboard in your waiting room, and it's for things like this. It's for the announcements of your monthly promotions. It's for if you're changing your hours, anything unique you want to announce. You should have a whiteboard in your office that you can, with dry erase, that you can make regular announcements. It's the big whiteboard, just like you should have in your rooms. So the whiteboard is, and here's what you want to do with this is, every time somebody refers, you put their first name on the board. Like you can put their first name and last initial, and obviously that's for HIPAA reasons. Don't put their first and last name. It's better to put their first name, last initial, as opposed to having their last name up there. So their first name with their last initial, and you put their name up on the board. And that's what you put. These are the leaders, and that's, this is the Leprechaun Pot of Gold drawing leaders, referral leaders. That would be the title. And then you would just have the names of the people who are starting to refer. And this is real important what happens. There is a psychology. Remember, you will not get 100% referral from everybody. That is not how. Remember Pareto's law. You have to find that 3% or that 17% who's going to refer you 2, 3, 4, and 5 patients. Remember, a small percentage of your patients are going to refer you the majority of your patients. You have to find those people from your present active list, and the only way to do that is to engage them all. Now, here's what interestingly happens with this whiteboard. They start getting competitive. I've seen some amazing things happen with this whiteboard when you start putting their names on there, and then next to their names you put the number, and the name with the most number goes to the top. It's just a competitive thing. And I'm telling you, I've seen it happen. Patients will sit in there. It's only a few. There'll only be like 2 or 3. And they will just get into that competitive mode. And they'll say, oh, so-and-so, how many do, and they'll come in the office and go, how many referrals? Am I still at the top of the board? I mean, I've had patients ask this stuff before. It's crazy how this works. They'll go, am I still at the top of the board? Or how many do I need to get to the top of the board? Or, it's just amazing. But remember, it's that small percentage of people. Not everybody's going to act that way. But you're going to have 1, 2, 3, or 4 people that are competitive, and they're going to see it, and they're going to want to be on the top of that board. So it's a very powerful thing. I remember we did business promotion one time, and 2 people just went, and they were in double-digit referrals. 10, 15. I mean, they were just double-digit. They were just going at it. It was like back and forth, and these 2 people were just driving this whole promotion. I was like, I love it. It's great stuff, and that's what you want. So remember, it's visual. So make sure you do that with your promotions. And that should be a regular component of every one of your in-office promotions, is a visual with who's winning, who's at the top of the board, and a number with it, and quantify it to stimulate that competitive nature. Number 2 is have a fish bowl. That's the visual aid at the front desk. And just mark on there, dress it up a little bit, put a little thing around it, a green thing, and whether you even buy a green bowl, and put on it, the leprechaun pot of gold. That's where the drawing will take place, put at the front desk. And then you always have, next to that is where patients sign up. Remember, anytime you're doing promotions, you always want a separate clipboard at the front desk that patient signs up that person's name. That helps increase the commitment, is what that does. And even though we will say tentative, okay? So, but you always want it to sign up. So there's the green fish bowl at the front of the desk. That's the pot of gold. And go ahead and put, I'd just buy one of those big green bowls, put that green sparkly stuff around it, and then buy those chocolate coins, just put all those chocolate coins in there, and even hand those chocolate coins out to the patients and the kids, and play with it, have fun with it. That's what this is about. This is emotional. Now, the patient should sign, not sing. The patient should sign them up at the front with the staff member with the date and time. Give the signed $50 credit slips, put patient's name on it, to be examples. So we could give the patient the $50 credit slip, authorized. So it says give signed $50 credit slips, put patient's name on an exam, $50 credit applied to copay for administrative sketching of patient, signed by so-and-so. Must be drawing. You cannot buy patients. So we'll go into that here in just a second. So the details, you're going to target active patients. Remember, you always find the minimum number of expected results. I talk about that. That is so important. And that gives the vision to your staff members. You have to cover what is called the minimum of expected results. And that's find all your active patients and throw them into the S-curve. Take 8% of them, divide them by 12. That's how many people will naturally be coming in that year. Go over to the other 92% of those active patients. Throw away 25%. That leaves you a number. Go ahead and take that number, drop out 10% that are very, very low, 10% that are real, real high. It'll be really easy. And then the rest of them are between 4 and 6. And that's how this works. And you have to have the ability to explain this. Your staff has to be able to see this. It's called potential. When somebody can't see something, they will never be able to do it. You have to be able to show them that, yes, there is a minimum number. And by the way, that's called pain motivation that we expect. But this is the potential when we use educational sales based on our present active list. This is our potential. And then, of course, you always want to make sure you're highly aware of 3 resistance. Each staff member interacts, drawing to take place at the end of the March 17th business day. Always take a picture, at least a picture. If you don't take a video, video's nice, because we always are going to take that picture. We're going to do a couple things. We're going to send it out to our patients. We're going to post it on Facebook, and we're going to send it to our local newspaper. We'd love for our local newspaper to do a story on this. Anytime your local paper does a story, it is gold. That is what we use for trust and authority, and we use it in many different forms. So these are some of the specifics. Remember, you've got 4 options. Number 1 is don't do anything, and that's the worst thing you could do, is not do the promotion. That's the worst thing you could always do. Number 2 is publicity. Remember, publicity works the least amount. So as an example for publicity is if you were written up the year before on this event, it'd be real easy to take that flyer, hand it to your patients with an offer. That's called publicity. That's literally publicity. You're only affecting trust. That's it. So it works the least. So we're not real big into only using publicity for publicity's sake. Usually when we use publicity, it's to get to an end goal, to advertising and then educational sales. It's not just for publicity alone, generally. So the third thing is you can do is advertising. So if you have low confrontation, and remember, this is what I suggest from doctors who have low confrontation and low skill level, instead of not doing nothing, because that's the worst thing you can do, is at least do advertising because it's low confrontational. So what does that mean, advertising? It means just introducing. All we're doing is giving them, we're lowering the barrier to entry, which is typically time or money. Remember, we're already in the trusted source. We're already in the trust category, in the introduction category. We're already there. So when we do the advertising, we will not be doing anything for need. And all we're trying to do now is lower the barrier to entry, that it's lower than their perceived need. And that's what will get people to act. So if you have low skill level and low confrontation, this is a good place to start. And a lot of times, to be honest with you, when I'm training doctors, I will typically do 2 things. I will start them on advertising. I'll teach them how to take the person into the admit phase. I'll teach them that, and then I'll teach them how to give the advertisement. So I really, really lower the bar when I'm training to stair-step people's skill levels. Now, obviously, the gold mine is the educational sales, because now we're dealing with trust. We're going to eliminate the obstacles of time and money, and we're going to establish need. Now, even though it is what's called third-party need, and remember, the biggest component of third-party need, or a third-party referral, is a pain-based empathy. A pain-based empathy. How well can you create empathy? Now, I'm going to show you the short version that I think everyone in your office should know. Everyone in your office. Now, at a later time, I'm going to go over the black belt version. But this is like a cut to the chase, short version of educational sales. And so very simply, here's what happens is we would introduce the promotion. That's all that is the title that I talked about right up here. Hey, we're having a free St. Patrick's Day gift for everybody, and you have a chance to win the Leprechaun Polygon drawing. And what it is for any of your family members or friends that you refer, you get a chance of a drawing for any of these prizes. Prize 1, prize 2, prize 3, okay? So that was how easily it was introduced. So, introduce the promotion. Ask if they have a specific circle of influence and if they are having the gateway. Now, this is where we talk about understanding how to get somebody in the admit phase by 3 questions. It's called open-ended, closed-ended, negative reverse. So that's how. Remember, if you just ask an open-ended question one time, you're screwed. You got over a 50% chance of that person saying no to you. So remember that. You can never accept one resistance, and you always want to go to the second resistance because that increases your chances 50%. They dramatically shoot up. And if you do a menu on the second resistance and not an open-ended question, the awareness is much higher. So we want to go in. So you ask if they have a specific circle of influence and if they have that gateway. So how that might would be, Um, do you have, after we introduce the promotion, say, do you have any family members or friends that are having any arthritis or muscle pain? Okay, so that would have been the open-ended first resistance. We expect a no over 50% of the time right now. The second question would be, how about now what I like to do is go specific. How about your mother? Remember, the target here is mother, sister, girlfriend. That's the target here. So what I like to do is, instead of being generic, I say, how about your mother? What's your mother's name? Jane. Is Jane having any arthritis or muscle pain? See, that is highly specific when I get the circle of influence, the name, and the gateway. It is very, very, very difficult for that person to say no to me now. Very difficult. And I'm at the second resistance. So that gets them to the admit phase. Ask if you can ask them 3 questions. Remember, 3. We don't want to be open. Say 3. We like to say 3 because it's confined and limited, but it's not 1. Do you mind if I ask you 3 questions? And then you always say, anytime it's third party, you have to say, and to be honest with you, you probably may not know the answer anyway. Do you mind if I ask 3 questions about Jane? And to be honest with you, you may not know the answer anyway. And that is such an important question because it allows their defenses to go down. It allows them to not know the answer and be okay with it. And in other words, it allows you to interrogate them. That question allows you to now interrogate. They're now going to say, yes, you can interrogate me. It's okay if I don't know, because you said it was okay if I don't know. That is a very important statement when you're talking about a third-party referral. You mind if I ask you 3 questions? And to be honest with you, there's a good chance you may not know the answer about Jane, and there's a good chance you may not know the answer to any of them. See, it's very hard for somebody to go no to that. I open the door for them very easily. So ask the first question and quantify. So is Jane, and we always use, is Jane having limited or restriction? So is this problem limiting or restricting Jane's ability to work? If so, would you know on a scale of 1 to 10 how much it is? So you always want to get the primary pain-based consequence. We start with work, and you always want to try to quantify it. That creates empathy. This is the key. Create empathy. Second question: do you know if Jane is having any limits or restrictions with her ability to sleep? If so, on a scale of 1 to 10. The third question is, Jane having any sticks ability to bathe, shower, get dressed on the scale? Would you know on a scale of 1 to 10? Now, I told you that there's a black belt version of this. So remember, we like 3 acknowledgments. I call them 3 hits of pain before you go to the offer. But I just only came up with 3. So remember, down the road, this is a very good soft, generic that all your staff members should know. But I will tell you, my marketing assistant is going to know the next 3 and the next 3. And the next 3 is cooking, laundry, or cooking, cleaning, laundry, or cooking. And then the next 3 after that is house maintenance, landscaping, and gardening. So my black belt marketing person will know all of those. And she'll know to go to each one of them until she gets 3. That's how she'll be trained. But every office member should know this. This is like basic 101 communication with your office member should know the basics of how, when they are out in the grocery store and somebody says, and then they introduce that they work for a chiropractor and somebody says they got back pain, she should know the script in unconscious competence because you trained her. You took her through the 4 stages of awareness, that now she knows how to take that person in the grocery store through the admit phase, through consequences, through personalization, and then flip them over and eliminate the obstacles of time or money. That's what she should have been trained to do, and you are the one that should have been trained her. This is what should happen. My staff members constantly brought in new pay. And remember, they're bonus. Remember, the first, generally speaking, the bonus that we like to give is one paying patient. So it's not the first visit. Let's say your first visit is $200, $300, $400. They don't get $400. They get your dollar per visit. So whatever your average dollar per visit collection is, give that to your patient for the first paying visit, and don't squander over if it's a Medicare cash or personal injury. Just take your damn dollar per visit collection, whatever that number is, and pay them it, even if it's a cash patient. Pay them the damn number. Don't nitpick with your staff when they're bringing in you business that you never would have gotten in the first place. And so many times chiropractors just can't see the big picture, and they shoot themselves in the foot. So every month, that was another check that my staff routinely got because they referred in people because they're out in the community. They're at church. They're grocery shopping. They're just out in the world. And they knew the formula. They knew damn well not to give that person a card and say, call. Let me tell you that. And then they got the bonus, say $50, say your case average is $50. And remember, it's only on the first paying visit. So you didn't lose anything. You didn't lose a damn thing in this. It's the first paying visit. So outside of whatever the offer is, even if the offer is free, it doesn't matter. The person has to have a first paying visit before that staff member gets the bonus. And that way you're not always out money without getting business. And that was just routine business. I mean, what I just told you was routine referrals. Every month, my staff got checks for business, for anywhere from 1 to 4 referrals just in the community. Those are just nice. And by the way, those are typically good patients because they're high trust. So anyway, back to the educational sales. So we're going to go through the 3 categories of consequences. And then just ask one. We're just going to go for one. We're not going to, this is not a black belt. This is not a black belt, but everybody should know this. This is not a black belt script. So then we go to the pinnacle of consequences. Do you think that Jane's, whatever complaint is, her back pain, may be becoming a permanent problem? And so that's present and future pain. And those are permanent. Remember, permanent is a high consequence. Nobody wants permanency, especially not just for ourselves, but for our family members and friends or loved ones. We don't want permanency. So that's the pinnacle question. That's after you've established the 3 hits. We're going to go to the pinnacle consequences. Now we can flip over to handle the obstacles of time or money. Now we're going to go for the offer. So we've established need, and now we're going to go for the offered. Go over the points of the offer and ask if they would be interested in helping Jane. So that's the offer. Now comes the offer. Remember, the offer is minimizing money. That's what the offer is. Now, after that, then you have to go over time, right? So the offer covers the obstacle of money. After money, we have to cover time. And remember, there's 3 categories of time you have to cover. So go over third-party book procedures. If you don't mind, can I ask you to come in with Jane? And the reason is I'm sure you know it's more comfortable for someone to go someplace where they've never been if they go with someone they know. So it would help make them more comfortable. Now, I'll just tell you, you have a much higher rate of that person coming in if you can do a third-party book. If you do not do a third-party book, you have a much lower rate of this person coming in because, as you know, it's much harder to go someplace where we've never been before, which means our need and our desire has to be much, much higher. I can have much, much lower need and desire if I have a vehicle to go, if I have a comfort with me, much more easier to go if there's somebody that I trust and that I'm comfortable with to go into an unfamiliar environment. So this is very, very important. As a matter of fact, it's so important that we stated this in the stipulation when we went to the criteria. It says right here, there's only 2 criteria. So when we gave through the offer, there's only 2 criteria. The referring patient must come into the office on or before the date. So we want them to know there's a deadline. Number 2 is they must come in with the referring patient. Now, that means does that mean I won't accept them if they don't come in with a referring patient? No. But these are called policies. This is what's called the 80% rule. Nothing's 100%, but everything has an 80% rule. And so this is the criteria that I definitely want to say. You must come in with, well, that's why. Because I already know there's a high likelihood of it not happening if they don't bring them in. That's why. And so that's why I call it one of the criteria. And remember, they'll be totally okay with it because it's a circle of influence. If it wasn't a circle of influence, they won't be okay with it. And you can't ask them to do it. And you can't. We have to bypass them and go to that person directly if it is not a circle of influence. If it's a circle of influence, they're totally okay with somebody they care about. So, and then we'd like to do it before that deadline. And so it says, and the key point there is why. And if you don't mind, one of the criteria is that they come in with you, and the reason is you're familiar that people are, it's much easier for us to go somewhere if we go with somebody that we're comfortable with than if we go somewhere where we don't know anybody. It's much harder to do that. I'm sure you can relate to that. So if you don't mind, if you can just have them come in with you, that'll make it much easier for them. Okay, so they have to know the why. Remember, everybody always has to know why. So would you just, for this one occasion, change your appointment for when they can come in after work, and that's a key component right there. So moving on, and remember, this is stuff we've covered before that you should, you should already be drilling in with your staff members. You should be re-drilling in. You should be role-playing until they're like black belts with this stuff. And with you too. If you can't do this, you got a real problem. This is like basic 101 educational sales. You should know this at an unconscious, incompetent phase, just like muscle memory. That's how fast. And then we go to address. Remember, anytime you address time or book the patient, remember there's always 3 obstacles that you have to talk about first before we set up the tentative appointment. Remember, I say tentative because that person cannot make a definitive appointment unless they're the decision maker. In other words, they're the guardian or the parent, which is unlikely. So you can never ask somebody to make an appointment for somebody else, but you can ask them to make a tentative appointment. Before we set up a tentative appointment, could you also remind them of our office policy regarding patients' appointments? And that's just called third-party office policy. And this is when we introduce the 3 concepts. Now, is your patient going to know to say this to that person? Hell no, they are not. Here's what will happen, is when the patient brings one of these obstacles up, now they will remember how to handle it. That's why this is how this works. So first, we open as early as whatever time you open, and we see patients up to whatever time you close, so they do not have to miss work. So we want to schedule the patient after their work. Remember, if you try to schedule this patient during their work, your resistance just went through the roof, and if they agree, because now they get off work next week or 2 weeks later, time just killed the deal. So you always want to push for after work. That helps to minimize the obstacle of time. So first we open as early as this, we close as late as this. They don't have to miss work. Make sure, if you could, make sure they know that. Number 2, second, when they arrive, they'll see the doctor within 7 minutes of their appointment. As you know, there's no waiting in our office. Could you make sure you let them know that? And third, the first day will only take about 20 to 30 minutes, so they'll not have to spend the whole day in our office. So if they have any questions about time, could you just be sure to let them know that? Now, the only time this doesn't work is if you're not doing this with your patient. In other words, when that new patient came in, you're spending an hour with them on the first visit, and you're spending 45 minutes to an hour with them every visit. And when they come in, they got to wait 15 or 20 minutes. This won't work because they know you're lying. And by the way, if that's what's going on in your office, you got some bad systems. You got some bad systems. You either have space, labor, equipment problems, you have flow problems, or you have skill problems. You got one of 5 problems. Well, none of that should ever happen. And that's during the industrial hours, not at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Industrial hours, chiropractic offices from 9 to 10:30 in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and from 4 to 6 in the afternoon after work. Those are called industrial hours. That's when nobody should be waiting. Okay, so we covered the time. So here we go. If we were going to do advertising, we would just say this one advertising line, hand them the flyer, and that's it. If we're going to do educational sales, go through the admit, a little bit of consequences, personalization, and then come over to time and money, minimize the time and money, do the third-party book. So let's go ahead and see what tentative appointment works for you, and then have the patient sign up the person at the front desk. And so remember, the whole key in educational sales is how much you can establish need. That's where you need to park the car. And everybody makes the opposite mistake. They're constantly running to the offer. They're running to time or money. And you have to do the opposite. 75% of your time should be in establishing need. 25% should be in the obstacles. Because when you have the need, it naturally diminishes the obstacles. So this is the outline, and we covered a lot of these in different webinars and things and such. Hopefully this is a reminder, but this is the St. Patrick's Day monthly in-office promotion, and some of the major components. It's a good promotion. It's a fun promotion. You'll find a lot of people like it. St. Patrick's generally has the connotations of lively, festive, fun. So it's a good promotion. And remember, it is more women-based, women to women. Gateways are arthritis, muscle pain. We go for the drawings. Everybody gets a gift. And remember, this is an activity. This is to have fun with in your office. That's what this is about. You will be getting business, and again, it just depends on how many active patients you have. Number one, so what's the potential, and then number two, what is your skill level, and that's what flat out's going to determine how many new patients you get from this. Now, you can obviously modify your offer too, but remember some of the components in the offer. Let me go to this offer real quick. Remember some of the major components. We always want, as a bare minimum in an offer, to have that patient come back the second day. And that's the purpose of offering one treatment. Now, you cannot ask this person to buy something. So this offer is typically free, or it might be like $1. That's what this is, like $1, or it's free. And remember, you cannot ask your patients to buy anything for anybody that it's outside of their circle of influence. And it's actually in their outer circle of influence also. People will generally only spend money for their inner circle of influence, mother, father, spouse, son, daughter. You know, that's the majority, and then it gets quasi with brother, sister, and definitely not for friends. So that's the general rule when asking, whether you're going to charge money for something like this. And by the way, this is not just for them. This is a referral program for everybody, but it's highly targeted. So it is not a paid program. It's not like they buy something for somebody, because remember, the further outside of that circle of influence they are, the less likely they're going to buy it. And this is for everybody. It's not just for mother, father, son, daughter. So that's why this is not a buy purchase. And then, so that's why I would say, even if you just charge $1 or something like that. And remember, the other thing that typically we like to do is if you were to put a fee with this, it depends on how busy your office is. A couple key points with the offer is the bare minimum. We want that patient coming in at least the second contact, and because remember, that affects trust, confidence, defenses, and resistance. So as a bare minimum, we want to offer one treatment, because that one treatment comes on the second day. So they come back, and that's called a second contact. So that helps with defenses and resistance, as opposed to just an exam, an x-ray, whatever, on day one. Now you don't have another day, and there's nothing to bring them back. So that's not good. And then the optimal situation is where they have at least 3 visits or 4 visits, 4 treatments or 3. If you're going to treat them on the first day, do 4. If you don't, do 3. And remember, that's optimal because now you have increased likelihood of that person sticking around, especially if you're good with your patient education. You have a high percentage of prepays, then you're going to want to gear it more toward 3 treatments, exam, x-ray, whatever, and 3 treatments. So now they have the opportunity to hear your message in the cell cycle, needs analysis, presentation, obstacles, close, and now they have a high likelihood of purchasing when they understand how everything works. So those are some of the variables with whether or not you would offer 1 treatment, no treatment, 3 treatments. Definitely not 2. You wouldn't do 2 and then treat them on day 2 and 3. That's stupid. And it would be stupid to offer 2 and treat them on day 1 and 2. Well, that's not as stupid. At least you got them for 2 visits. But generally, you want them for that second one or the 4th one, not a 3rd or not the first visit or the 3rd. That's stupid. That just doesn't make any sense. So think of that when you're playing your offer. And then also remember, sometimes when we do offer, if this is a fee, remember if it's a high circle of influence, we can ask them to buy it, or we can just make the offer. And the dollar amount that you would put against it, remember, always goes to the psychographics of money. So money's in $1, $5, $10, $20, $50, $100 increments. So you would just be under that. And which one you would pick would be dependent on how busy you are. So if you're under 100 visits a week, I'd say keep it under $20. You'd be $17 or $19. Never say that psychographic number, always just below it. And so if you're trying to create more new patients, you might say $1 or $17. If you're seeing maybe 1 to 150, you might say $47 or something like that. If you're seeing over 150, your time's more valuable. You might say $97, but then if that's the case, I'd definitely move it up to 3 visits, something like that. And then the other thing that you might want to consider is if you do charge anything, donating it, at least a percentage of that or 100% of it, tie it to a local charity. Tie it to a local charity that's relative to this promotion. Okay? Because that's called sense of duty. So, but you don't have to. The St. Pat's Day, you don't have to tie it to a charity at all. It's kind of a standalone. Everybody is quite familiar. St. Pat's Day, festive day, leprechaun, et cetera, et cetera. So if you just offered, that for new patients, a free exam, x-ray, and 1 treatment. And by the way, if you do have an x-ray, include that in there. Include 2 x-rays and 1 treatment. And I would do that for no charge, to be honest with you, especially if I was seeing under 100 patient visits a week. So these are some of the variables. And we talk about these extensively when we go over money and how to put an offer together and what are some of the psychological components you need to consider when you're putting an offer together. We talk about that extensively. So modify your offer accordingly.